this sad section, there's going to be death, 2 marriages, and 2 more deaths. And if you can't see God's hand, his sovereign hand, all over the 5 verses that we're looking at today, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, he created us, he directs us, and then he uses our movements. I'm talking about the people in the story for his purposes and to show us pictures of other things. He gave them life, and it is his choice to take life. And as I said, he does this by his own will. So when we look at stories like this and we apply them to our life, we can say, well, why did God let my husband die? Or, something like that. God is God. We are man, and we just have to accept that he's in control. That doesn't mean that we can't mourn and grieve and be sorrowful. Those are natural things. But we should never call God to account and say, God, you have done wrong by this. We are his workmanship, just as Jeremiah says about the potter and the clay. God can take the clay, the potter can take the clay and make anything he wants, and he can destroy the pot anytime he wants. And the Bible says that we are vessels of clay, and he can use us as he so chooses. So remember God's sovereignty as we're looking through these verses and through this story, because at the end, his covenant people receive a very, very good end. Okay? And that's what we need to keep remembering as we look through it in our lives as well. Verse 3, then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died. No mention is made concerning how long they lived in Moab, but at some point, God, in order to continue the narrative in the manner which he alone is the decider of, he ended the life of Elimelech in a foreign land in which he sojourned. Thus, the story must now take on a new biographical direction. I want to highlight this to you. Elimelech dies, and then the sons marry, and then the sons die. The order of what is occurring is important for us to understand what God is doing in redemptive history. Everything is pointing to something towards the end of this story, which pictures Christ and his work in our lives. Verse 3 continues, and she was left and her 2 sons. Naomi is the one to remain behind to lead the family through their sojourn, she with no husband and they with no father. There with her sons, they will wait for their own departure from Moab. Elimelech had simply gone in advance of them. And the Hebrew word used to describe them being left, which is vatisha er, gives this thought. They remained, he simply departed in advance. Okay? Verse 4 continues, or verse 4, now they took wives of the women of Moab. Again, as before, scholars treat this as a real offense and something that was forbidden for them to do. However, this is not the case at all. Nor does the story imply it, nor does it indict them in any way for this. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, the forbidden marriages are listed, and they include the daughters of the people who lived in Canaan, the land. They are named individually, and there is nothing said about Moabites. Later in Deuteronomy 23, it is implied that marriage to a Moabite could occur, but with restrictions. There it says these words, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter the assembly of the Lord even to the 10th generation. None of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever, because they did not meet you with bread and water on the road when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam, the son of Beor, from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you. Now, if an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter the assembly even to the 10th generation, it then implies that marriage may occur to them, but with guidelines that are given for that instance. Further, this applied to the female who would marry a male, but it did not apply to a male who is married to a female. Now, how do we know this? It's because the name travels through the father, not through the mother. None of those in the line of Ruth will be excluded from the assembly, even King David, who comes from Ruth, and he did enter the assembly. He was only the 3rd generation from Ruth. In 1 Kings chapter 7, Solomon is noted for being disobedient for such a marriage. And there it says these words, which seem to contradict it. So I want to read it to you. But King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, from the nations of whom the Lord had said to the children of Israel, you shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. Surely they will turn your hearts after their gods. In this, the list includes the explicitly forbidden marriages to the Hittites. But the list doesn't mean that all included, as we saw a moment ago, are forbidden. And it is from an Ammonite wife that the next king of Israel, Solomon's son, a guy named Rehoboam, would come. He wasn't excluded from the assembly. Both Ruth and Rehoboam's Ammonite mother are ancestors of Jesus Christ.